my co-host, my partner in crime, the one and only Damichael Cole is back with us. Damichael, it's good seeing you again. It's been a while. How have you been, sir?
Shawn, I've been great. It's good seeing you too. I think the people love it. When the tandem is here, so it's great. It's great to be back on the screen, and as you would say, look to this side,
One
whatever
of these
side
two
it
ways.
is,
Yeah.
one of these two ways, and to see my co-host on the
Yeah.
screen.
Well, and I know that the NBA offseason is what it is, but to be honest with you, though, this is a pretty special episode, and we'll get into why that is in just a moment. Welcome to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, one and all, to the Locked On Grizzlies podcast. My name is Shawn Coleman. Damichael Cole with me. Hey, first time I ever get it right on the first try. There we go. All right. But thank you so much for joining us. As always, it's been a while since we've been back together. You can find myself at StatsSAC, Damichael, Dad Burn It, at Damichael C on Twitter, and the show at Locked On Grizz as well, free on all podcast platforms. So a bit of news to start off this show in the month of August, and in what has been a kind of a slow time when it comes to the NBA offseason. This is actually going to be my last show with Locked On Grizzlies. I have actually, in the recent past, have had some new and exciting, all good things, new and exciting opportunities, for myself and my family outside of sports media. I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be covering the Grizzlies. You're not going to get rid of me that easy. I'll be covering them in some capacity over at Grizzly Bear Blues and pumping out a lot of stats because that's what I love to do, but just some reshuffling. And, that's led to this being the end of the road for me with Locked On Grizzlies. But, it's kind of sad, but also exciting. But I will say this, probably one of the most, if not the most, unfortunate things is I'll not get to do this anymore with Damichael Cole. And in Damichael, I can honestly say this, all joking aside, it has been an absolute pleasure getting to do the show with you over the past 6 or so months, man. I'm gonna miss doing it with you. So,
Yeah, I'm over here wiping my eyes.
I know, a tissue. Hey, you can go get a tissue if you want to.
Locked On viewers, I sent Shawn a song this morning. The Jackson 5 song, "Never Can Say Goodbye."
Thankfully, it was the Jackson 5 singing it, not Damichael. That's what I was most grateful for. So,
I should have sung it myself, but
it would have been deleted.
All jokes aside, this has been a great run over these past few months. I got here in March, and Shawn he was a great help for me stepping in with Locked On Grizzlies, and it's been great just seeing the Locked On viewers, how you evolve. We read the comments, we listen to the feedback and everything, and people have really said a lot of good things about how we work as a tandem, and that has been really encouraging as we continue to try to improve the show and just grow from here. And Shawn, like I said, he's been a great co-host. He's been a great, co-worker overall, and gonna miss having the guy around. I'm gonna miss not just having him around on the show, but beating him with my left hand 12-0. I just haven't done that to too many people, and that's one of the more important things I'm gonna miss about Shawn as well.
Almost like you've never done it. I honestly can't remember when it happened. That's a story for another time. All joking aside, I'm glad to call Damichael a friend. And, he's been great at what he does. Excellent. Look forward to many more conversations and years of being able to converse with him and others when it comes to the Grizzlies. But, the only way to end one era, and, it's actually been nearly 2.5 years. I started back on April 10th. It was a month after the end of the basketball season during the 2020 COVID year. But the only way to end one era is to begin another. And we're actually very happy to introduce the new co-host of Locked On Grizzlies. And I wonder if people are going to know this person. Is he here? Let's see if he's here.
I think he's here.
There he is. My goodness, he is here.
I'm here.
Is
risen from the dead.
Is that the Undertaker's music? It is Joe Mullinax. Mr. Mullinax, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Shawn Coleman, one of my very best friends in all the Grizzlies-dom. And of course, Damichael Cole, I got to know you briefly when I was over running grizzlybearblues.com as the site manager, SB Nation's grizzlybearblues.com, that is. And I miss the Grizzlies so much, I decided to do a Tom Brady-esque retirement. And here I am, and I'm right back in the saddle covering the Memphis Grizzlies. This fun side note has been in the mix for like 4 years now. Locked On Grizzlies and I have had several conversations in the past, and it just didn't make sense at the time. And obviously we were building GBB's podcast network and, all the great work that Shawn has done in the past there and continues to do as he keeps writing at GBB. This is not me missing GBB, because Parker's doing a phenomenal job. And the main reason I left that blog was because it was time for someone on the ground in Memphis to take the ball and run with it. And I think Parker's done just that in his first few months running the site. But it's an awesome opportunity to work with Damichael, to still be talking Memphis Grizzlies basketball. And I'm appreciative to Nick and all the Locked On staff. And I literally signed my contract as I was waiting to log on to the show. So I am signed, sealed, delivered. YouTube and podcasters everywhere, I am yours.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun run. Joe mentioned it. We met briefly. Actually, when I got on at the Commercial Appeal, Joe reached out and had me join the Grizzly Bear Blues podcast, and that's where we had our first conversations. And I enjoyed myself on that podcast, so I'm expecting us to have a really good time on here. And Locked On Grizzlies viewers and fans, I think you will enjoy us as well as a tandem. Joe, very knowledgeable about the Grizzlies. I've follow this coverage even before, I joined the beat as well. And, I think we're going to work really well together as well. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to working with you. I think we're going to really fit well together. I think that Shawn is a lot worse at basketball than I am. So if you and I ever get a chance to play, you may still beat me because I don't play as often as I used to, but I doubt it will be 12-0. So
I just love how this is locked on assumptions is what this is turning into.
I'm really sad that you got theoretical with his left hand only.
With my left hand.
There's a 75-page scouting report on me, and neither one of you had ever seen me play basketball. When y'all put the game controllers aside and want to come put your game on the 94 feet of hell I would put each of you through, come call me. Come call me.
We might have to make that happen, Michael. Can we talk to David Locke and get some money in the budget to make that happen?
We probably can do it, but I don't think Shawn is factored into the budget anymore.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Wow, me versus Damichael. We can make that like a charity event or something.
We could just
Shawn can be the special guest referee.
All joking aside, Locked On Grizzlies is going to get even better from here. We're actually about to get into a little bit of Grizzlies talk, but I will say this, I will be listening as much as I possibly can. And I will also say this on a personal note, when it comes to Grizzlies perspectives, but more importantly, when it comes to people, doesn't get much better than these two. And so I'm looking very much forward to all the great content that they'll put out. And I'm looking forward to not only what I've done with them in the past, but also hopefully some conversations in the future. But just, hey, wanted to start off the show with a little bit of a passing of the torch, an excited opportunity. We're going to take a break here in just a moment, and then we're going to come back, and we're going to talk some Grizzlies basketball. But first, before we do that, that was a sentimental segue, Damichael. That was a segue full of sentimentality right there. Before we do, want to talk with you a bit about BetOnline. And the thing about BetOnline is this, is that if you want to bet on a podcast that's going to give you great Grizzlies perspectives, it's Locked On Grizzlies. But if you want to tap into a site via your mobile device or the laptop that's going to allow for you to be able to bet on all your favorite sports actions. If you want to bet against the Washington football team because they may win 2 games this year, or you want to bet for the Tennessee Vols winning 10 games this year, whatever you want to do, betonline.net is the best place for you to do it. Mobile device, laptop, make sure you use betonline.net. Did I say something wrong, Joe?
I think you got that reversed, but that's okay. The Washington football team will probably win about 10, and I think the Vols will win about 2.
I heard all the talk about Carson Wentz winning the division last year. That didn't work out too well for him. So, Joe. So let's get it started here. So, the fun thing about Joe is that his basketball and Grizzlies perspectives are excellent, but he also knows how to, stir up some content, some conversation on Twitter. Nothing negative.
Oh yeah, he does.
Me?
Looking at some fun perspectives.
Don't do that. Whoa, that's not fair.
Hey, we're going to
You say that I purposely prod and poke and try to get people to yell at me for hours on social media?
Poke and you podcast now. Hey, you're the king of alliteration. So let's
I don't know that I fully appreciate that accusation. I think that
is a compliment.
I am very much, Parker Fleming, the new site manager. He's not even really new anymore. The site manager over at grizzlybearblues.com. He would lovingly call me when I was at that site, the Undertaker of Grizzlies media and blogging in particular, because I just would refuse to die. And I changed throughout the years, but I didn't really change as much as the circumstances around me changed. And I get a kick out of when people say that I'm overly negative. When just this time last year, 12 months ago, I was being called a shill for the team and the organization, and I was overly positive about the direction because of transactions that occurred, especially the Steven Adams trade. So I think that it's more about me being not necessarily the Undertaker of Grizzlies media, but I'm kind of like the Batman in like the Dark Knights with Heath Ledger as the Joker. I am incorruptible. I am very much me in terms of my takes. And, sometimes I'm very wrong. Sometimes I'm very right. And most of the time I'm in the middle, shades of gray. And I think that's the biggest frustration for people is, and Shawn, you know this, and Damichael, you'll get to know this if you don't already. I'm the most stubborn person you'll probably ever talk to in terms of how I view things. So when I have a position, just because you yell at me online, I'm probably not going to change my mind.
So we unfortunately are going to have to say goodbye to Joe for a few moments after he called himself the Batman of Grizzlies Twitter. You don't do that in front of a co-host, or excuse me, ex-co-host, whose favorite hero is Batman. You don't do that, Joe.
You can't have Batman and Captain America behind you and claim both of them.
I didn't say I had both of them. Batman's my favorite. All joking aside. Let's get to it. And I was complimenting you. Content creator, that's what it comes to. Damichael does a great job. He does a great job with the positivity and the coverage. I back up. I enjoy doing the stats. You're really stirring things up a bit with good perspectives. That's a compliment. It's a compliment. But all joking aside, Joe, we've talked about the offseason for the Grizzlies and the fact that it's been very unique. And all joking aside, the thing about it is that I feel like a perspective that's out there is that on paper in August right now, this team, a lot less certainty. If you want to call them worse than what they ended the season as, that's fine, I think. But there's a lot less certainty. But one thing that I think stands out is I think that there is more potential for this roster right here to make noise in the postseason 2, 3, 4 years down the line, if it doesn't happen this year, then maybe with the team they ended with last season. A lot of different perspectives. What says Joe Molinax? How, as time has gone on, how has your opinion of the Grizzlies evolved from what's happened so far this offseason?
Well, I think my first takeaway from the offseason is it's a shame on me kind of thing, because to the credit of Zach Kleiman and everybody in that Grizzlies organization, they have made it very clear that they are on a timeline of their design and they will not deviate from it. Once or twice, they talked about championship windows and contenders, and they were the second best team in the NBA in the regular season in terms of record, and they looked like a contender. I think that was a happy accident, Bob Ross style. They were not planning on being the second best team in the NBA, and they're not allowing the fact that they are ahead of schedule to accelerate their plan, if that makes sense. So I will take responsibility for viewing them through a lens that they never foresaw being what they wanted. They have not changed who they are. And I think it's important to point out that you could very easily argue this is the best front office in the NBA the last 3 seasons. John Morant was, kind of a slam dunk. A few people argued for RJ Barrett, but there was a brief conversation. A vast majority of folks said John Morant, obviously. Anybody would have, or most people would have picked John Morant. But I do believe that over the past 3 years, they've earned a lot of credit in terms of what their vision for this organization is. And this is the first time that that vision conflicts with what the on-the-court product was. You could very easily argue, and I'm sure Damichael and I will in the days and weeks ahead. You see it on Twitter and on Grizzly Bear Blues comment threads and on Reddit and all these other places that are terrifying to me. The idea that the Grizzlies were not at full strength against the Golden State Warriors and they took them to 6 games. You could very easily make that argument, whether it's Bane being banged up, obviously Steven Adams with his COVID issues, anybody that would have COVID, understandably, would have. There was a lot of adversity. And then obviously John Morant's injury. They pushed the Golden State Warriors, the eventual champions, just as well at times as the Boston Celtics, who played them in the NBA Finals. So you could talk yourself into very easily them being a contender, regardless of what happens at the end of the rotation. And I think a lot of people have done that statistically. There's lots of evidence to back that up. I am of the mind that if you are a contending team, or if you are making active moves to be a contending team, you are going to make transactions that are going to improve your roster. I don't know that they've done that in the here and now. That would be my argument. And that is where that timeline thing comes into play, where they may see themselves as a contender in terms of the 8 guys that are their central core pieces. But in the course of NBA history, very rarely has an 8-person core been so young. And the Grizzlies just got younger in terms of their roster. They didn't get older through the moves they've made. They've actually decreased their age. So they've been the exception for 3 years. They have outperformed expectations for 3 years. How do you outperform 56 and 26? I think that it's natural to expect a step back. I think it's natural to say that progress is not linear, and they obviously could still get better even if their record is worse. And they have put themselves in a position through the moves they've made to be able to afford John Morant long-term, Jaren Jackson Jr. long-term. Desmond Bane is doing extension, which I know we'll talk extensions here in a moment. I am encouraged by the fact that they are perhaps the people in the room more stubborn than me, and that they are not going to change what their perspective of things is, and they are betting on themselves to defend that idea. They've been right almost 100% of the time up to this point. And when they've been wrong, it's been the kind of mistake that hasn't cost them long-term.
Very well said. And I think stubborn is the word you use when you're describing the Grizzlies in the front office there. It's perfect word. That team, that franchise, they basically have said, hey, we're making calls. They're not denying that they're not making calls to make the roster better and improve. But they're not just going to go out there and improve just for the sake of it, or take players who people think are better just for the sake of it. They're only going to do deals that make sense for them. And all of that goes into, where they are as a team now, the youthfulness of the group. Because to your point, Joe, now with the Jaren Jackson injury, when this team got younger, if Jaren Jackson Jr. gets hurt last season, we got Kyle Anderson, who he isn't Jaren Jackson, but you know exactly what you're going to get. And you know how the team can incorporate him into the starting lineup while minimizing the difference in between the two players. Right now, it's one of the biggest questions on the Grizzlies is who is going to be that 5th starter. I just did an episode on Locked On Grizzlies where I talked about the numbers and Brandon Clarke and how he makes the most sense. But there are some people who will say Brandon Clarke has been so effective off the bench, 19 and a half minutes and over 10 points per game, and, keep him in that role. But then it goes back to what you were saying, Joe, because now you're talking about David Roddy, Jake LaRavia, Santi Aldama, Xavier Tillman, basically a bunch of guys who were just at Summer League, and Zaire Williams. You're talking about adding a guy from Summer League basically to the starting lineup of a 56-win team and improve. It's a tough task. Now, this Grizzlies team, I'm not the one to doubt them because, again, this team did just win 56 games with the second youngest roster in the NBA. They clearly have, a method to their madness. And I think getting Dillon Brooks back for a full course of a season, potentially a healthy Dillon Brooks, not one who's in and out the lineup, and just more players getting better just with age. Zaire Williams, Desmond Bane, John Morant, all these guys are so young that there's going to be a lot of internal growth. And I think that's a big part of the Grizzlies thinking too. If these guys were all 28 in their primes, it would make more sense. It would make less sense in terms of why they're not made bigger moves through free agency. But I think the thing with the Grizzlies is if you look at the roster, all these guys are so young. They have clear holes in their games where if they improve on things, they have more jumps to make. Even John Moran. We're going to talk about it more in the coming weeks, but John Moran, if he improves as a mid-range shooter or even just takes the shot, he right now teams, when he drives the basketball, no one's expecting him to stop for the mid-range shot. They're expecting the floater or him to go straight to the basket. Desmond Bane, he talked about it himself. He told me he wants to work off the dribble shooting, doing more as a playmaker. Jaren Jackson Jr., at the end of the season, in the exit interviews, he had the longest list from Taylor Jenkins on things to improve on. This young core has a long ways to go, believe it or not. And I think they're kind of counting on that internal growth more so than saying, hey, let's go get these outside guys. And we'll find out, if that method is really the answer in this loaded Western Conference.
And the thing I'll say is that it is a loaded Western Conference. But, when you look at the calendar, we're still about 10 weeks away from the start of the NBA season. But as Joe and Damichael both can speak to more than I can when it comes to their coverage in the past and in the present and the near future, this is extension season. And there are plenty of potential opportunities for the Grizzlies to sign guys long-term, but some interesting decisions as well. We'll discuss that in just a moment. And Damichael, I'm going to get emotional when it comes to this. I'm going to get emotional. Built Bar. I'm going to miss Built Bar. Built Bar. Joe, now, Joe, you've heard me talk about this before, but it's the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. I mean, there's over 18 different flavors for bars, 18 different flavors for puffs. Damichael likes it in the morning at 3 a.m. before he writes his stories. I like it in the afternoon to keep me awake from falling asleep. But the whole point is, whenever you love the idea of having a healthy, tasty snack, Built Bar is going to be the thing for you to do. And if you go to Built.com right now, put in the promo code LOCKED15, you'll get 15% off your next order from Built Bar. Make sure you make Built Bar a part of your day. Obviously, we can't thank you enough for checking out Locked On Grizzlies. For those who may be checking out a bit later on in the episode, the reason why you see three of us here is because it's a new era of Locked On Grizzlies. My last show here, it's going to be sad to leave, but, hey, the time is right, and the show's only going to get better, much better people, much better perspectives than my own. Joe Mullinex now here with Damichael Cole as the new co-host of Locked On Grizzlies. It's going to be an exciting era of the show. So, Joe, let's get into it a little bit, because I want to hear your perspective. I was thinking, maybe we should, let each one of us talk about a potential extension, but let's just let you, give your full takes on looking at Dillon Brooks, Brandon Clarke, and Steven Adams. I think there's very, very logical pros, sensible cons as to the reason why you may or may not want to tackle an extension for each of those players right now. But what says you? What are you hoping to see probably in the next few weeks when it comes to potential extensions for those three?
I know it's my first day, and it's really kind of like a half day here because Shawn's obviously still helping. Can I make a suggestion? I'm going to organize this in a start, bench, cut kind of way. There's a different way that people listening and watching can probably think of that I really want to say, but I don't want to get fired on my first day at Locked On Grizzlies. So let's do start, bench, cut. All right. And that's my priority of who I would extend. I would start with Dillon Brooks. I think that Dillon Brooks matches what this team needs in terms of being a three or not necessarily a three, scorer off the dribble. Watching this team play, you could very easily argue D'Anthony Melton is no longer here because he can't really create off the dribble. He was very dependent on others for offense. That was one of the weaknesses in his game, and he just wasn't necessarily seen as an investment point for the Grizzlies. Dillon Brooks can do that. And I also think it's important to point out that Dillon Brooks has been extended by this front office before. That was something that I said throughout my time at Grizzly Bear Blues. The one guy that hadn't been extended yet was Kyle Anderson. So is it an accident that Kyle Anderson is gone? No, I don't think they ever planned on extending Kyle Anderson. That was a guy that was not part of their original signings. He was a signing from the previous regime. So I see Dillon Brooks as someone that they'll prioritize because he can create for himself offensively. Maybe he's not a traditional 3-and-D with the 3 aspect. When he's on, he's one of the best 20 defenders in the NBA, and that's probably too broad. You can probably narrow that net if you want. But I'm going to be 20, just try to be unbiased. And that makes him one of the best defensive players in the National Basketball Association. You combine that with the ability to create your own shot off the dribble, whether it's with the reserves, whether it's as a starter, another option next to John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. To me, it's Dillon Brooks. He should be the priority. Shout out to Dillon Brooks Island. My bench would be Brandon Clarke. I think that Brandon Clarke is a player that you sign on a team-friendly deal that will be someone who can continue to grow along this roster. He provides a rim-running aspect. He's very strong defensively next to Jaren. All the numbers have been talked about that. Shawn, you've talked about that plenty of times. Their switchability on the perimeter, how they can stick. Brandon Clarke in that Golden State Warriors series was asked to do a lot of different things with a lot of different players. He looked sharp at times. He had struggles in previous playoff series as well. But I think that he's a guy, because of his age, because of what he brings to the table in terms of the malleability of his game, especially defensively. I think you need a big like Brandon Clarke, whether he's a starter or reserve. I would say goodbye to Steven Adams. Do I think that they're not going to re-sign him? 40% that they might. I don't know that he makes sense for them in terms of what they want to be long-term. He certainly was the perfect Jonas Valanciunas replacement because he did a lot of the same things that Jonas did without the usage in terms of what he can be an effective basketball player without scoring the basketball. And maybe that was another reason you could have seen the Kyle Anderson writing on the wall. Kyle Anderson does everything well playing basketball except score, especially score from the perimeter. Kyle is a great defender. He's a great passer. He can dribble. He can create for himself. It's just the actual putting the ball in the basket where Kyle struggles at times, especially outside the paint. Steven says, forget that. I don't even need to shoot. Don't give me the ball. I'll screen bound. I'll play defense. I can do a lot of Jonas Valanciunas did without taking from Desmond Bane, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr. It allows their usage to go up, and you still get the good things of what Jonas did. So I could see them re-signing him, but I'm prioritizing. I'm going Dillon, Brandon, Steven, because of what those guys are capable of doing and how they fit alongside your core three. This is one of the things that I said on Twitter recently. I said that John Morant is Memphis' Steph Curry. Not in terms of skill set. Obviously, they're very different players of importance. Like John Morant should never, ever be anything else other than a Memphis Grizzly. Desmond Bane should never, ever be anything else other than a Memphis Grizzly. Jaren Jackson Jr. is the Draymond Green. Desmond is the Clay. Those three guys are your core. The pieces around it, you can kind of figure out as time goes on. Those three dudes never leave Memphis, Tennessee. If I'm able to make sure that doesn't happen, who fits best next to those three? To me, it's Dillon, Clarke, Adams, at least in terms of a long-term fit. And that's why you're giving them extensions.
So with Brandon Clarke, I want to ask you this, Joe, because
sure.
He's the most interesting of that group, in my opinion, from this perspective. You just mentioned the words team-friendly deal. So let's flip it around. Let's put your Brandon Clarke shoes on. If you are Brandon Clarke, are you taking a team-friendly long-term deal this offseason? Or do you say, Jaren Jackson's not starting the season. I feel there's an opportunity for me to cash in and get a bigger contract if I play up to my potential. What would you do if you were in the shoes of Brandon Clarke? Because all we know, the Grizzlies could have an offer out there right now, and Brandon Clarke could be saying, no, thank you. I'm going to bet on myself.
That's a great point. That's a great clarification point on my end. I think that the big thing with Clarke is when I say team-friendly deal, I don't mean you don't pay him. Like, to me, Dillon Brooks is currently on a team-friendly deal. He's making $12 or $13 million. Mm-hmm. I think that is a good value for what Dillon Brooks was when he signed the extension. And to me, 4 years, $50 million, maybe a little less than that, in that ballpark. And again, when you give those random numbers, a couple million up, a couple million down, however it fits their salary cap, 12 to 13 million a year, I think is good value for Brandon Clarke. That is what I would be comfortable doing. I certainly would not be comfortable doing that for Steven Adams at this point, at least not the higher end of that estimate. I believe that when I say team friendly, they love the descending contract. They're big fans of that. They pay at the beginning and then it de-escalates as the years go by. And I see him, like I said, kind of on a similar deal to what Dillon Brooks is currently on, that 13 million annual average. That would be team friendly to me because I see him as that level of player in terms of what he can do as a rim runner. He changes his jump shot every year. If somebody ever finally figures out a rhythm for him, and if he finds it, right, he still has areas in his game, even though he's a little bit older of these young Grizzlies. He has areas that he can improve. So when I say team friendly, and I think Parker Fleming over at grizzlybearblues.com, I still read the blog. I think he wrote recently in that ballpark, roughly around that amount. And I would be very comfortable with that. I think that's fair. Now, could Brandon Clarke play himself above that? Maybe. We are entering in a new TV contract era, and that money is going to become even more monopoly money. Maybe he sees that as an opportunity. I mean, that explains the John Konchar extension to an extent. So if Clarke sees that contract for John Konchar and goes, I can make more than that, maybe you're right, Damichael. I could see a lane where that happens. But if I'm Brandon Clarke and the Grizzlies put 4 years, $52 million in front of me, that's hard to say no to, in my opinion. And you know that the Grizzlies are going to appreciate Clarke more than most other teams are going to, because they're the ones that invested in him from the beginning, the ones that traded up for him, the ones that allowed for him to have the platform and the playing time, honestly, to be the player that he was as a rookie. That carries weight. And I do think that's something that, you know, as the days, weeks, months go on, that's something we can talk about. I think it's under discussed, and I think you've written about it before, Damichael, whether it's taking care of a veteran guy and making sure they can kind of go to the team they want to, or depending on how they do a buyout or the type of trade they make. Memphis, from afar, and you would know better than me, they seem to treat players well, and that carries a lot of weight. You earn credit and capital with people, and I think that that's a priority of that front office, to their credit and to their, you know, John Moran signed a contract without any player option. He's there for the next 6 years. That he could have very easily put an option in there, and the Grizzlies wouldn't have blinked an eye signing that contract. He committed to them. I do see the investment that they're making, not just in the players, but the people, potentially being something that pays off for them when it comes to a Clarke extension.
And I agree. I think that is a very unique thing. And you know, I've kind of, you know, I've thrown some numbers around, and you know, I think that this is kind of where I stand when it comes to these potential things. 4 years, $50 million, I think makes perfect sense for Brandon Clarke. That is natural when you compare that contract to others that are out there. Wendell Carter Jr., you've got Robert Williams. I don't necessarily know if Brandon Clarke has that potential. He's a bit older than those guys, but that shows that would be a pretty, you know, sizable commitment, but a fair commitment. I think that makes sense. For Dillon Brooks, I see it kind of like the Tyus Jones situation, where the Grizzlies were able to give him 2 years. They were able to give him a bit higher average annual value, 2 years, $30 million, have him be there as that kind of safety valve, that certain aspect at the point guard position where if John Morant gets hurt, you've got a plausible starter to come in and help him out. He fits that backup role until perhaps Kennedy Chandler is ready to go. Dillon Brooks, 2 years, 35 to 40 million, 3 years, 50 million. Maybe you could possibly look at that. You give him a potential contract where you're giving him a sizable raise from where he's making now. Give you a nice safety valve, safety net for your young combo forwards to grow. And once they're grown and they're on good contracts ready to contribute, you've got a good trade asset in Dillon Brooks. Now, Steven Adams, I'm with you, Joe. 2 years, 20 million would potentially be what I talk with him about. But if you've got Brandon Clarke and Dillon Brooks already signing their deals, I don't think it makes a lot of sense for Jaren, Brandon Clarke, Dillon, and Steven Adams to be making up $100 million of your payroll over the next few seasons after this one. So I'm kind of on the ball with you. I think that there is a clear priority for Brandon and Dillon to potentially get extensions. I'd go 4 years for Brandon, maybe a little bit shorter for Dillon. And again, I think Steven Adams, just as you see this team grow another year, unless it's on a really team-friendly deal, I'm not really seeing it make sense, though I absolutely love Steven Adams and know the team does as well. But that's kind of my perspective. Damichael, with where we are on the calendar, what says you?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if right now you got to think long-term, because there is a long-term perspective to this. And with Dillon Brooks, is he a part of that? It's the question. I think that question won't be answered right now. That question will probably be answered over the course of the season. I think right now he's a part of that, but I've said it time and time again, Zaire Williams' progression ties into Dillon Brooks' future, because if Zaire Williams plays like your future small forward, you're not going to re-sign Dillon Brooks. It's just not going to make financial sense, because, I mean, you may want to, but John Morant's deal is going to kick in next year. Jaren Jackson will be in the second year of his deal. Desmond Bane will sign an extension next season as well, and that price is probably going up, going to go up even more next season with him. You're going to have three guys who are on pretty big contracts, 9-figure contracts, that is. And then you talk about the pieces around them. Brandon Clarke, you're probably going to extend him. He's probably going to be one of the highest paid backup big men in the NBA, just at that annual value that you guys are talking about, 12 million, 13, 14 million a year. That'll put him as one of the highest paid backup big men in the NBA. All of that money, it's not going to, someone, at the end of the day, someone's going to get the short end of the stick. It's kind of how it goes in this business. And I think if Zaire Williams progresses the way that he's trending towards, I think that'll be Dillon Brooks. It'll make the most sense, being that you'd have Zaire as your starting small forward. And we talked about those rookies, right? David Roddy, Jake LaRavia. Why did they draft them? Well, they're wings who are very position versatile. They can help ease the transition, at the backup 3 spot with those two guys. And then you have John Conchar, who the Grizzlies clearly are investing in.
They love John Conchar.
They sure love John Conchar. So that's your backup shooting guard, right? I mean, you gave him the money. You're not paying him that money to sit on the bench.
Sure do.
I mean, at the end of the day, you hit on a great point. I think we all did. With Jaren Jackson Jr.'s injury, DeAnthony Melton, and Kyle Anderson being, with the Sixers and Timberwolves now, 3 players that really stand out in terms of their progression, but also, seeing if they can make money long-term with the Grizzlies are Zaire, Brandon, and Dillon. So it'll be very interesting to see. Guys, I'm not happy that we've arrived at this point, but we are there. It has been an absolute pleasure to all of you, over the all the listeners and everyone that is tuned in with the kind words and things such as that. Again, I look very much forward to whatever may come my way in the near future. Again, a lot of my writing and things like that will still be over at Grizzly Bear Blues. Looking forward to definitely being a great part of that site continuing to grow, building off Joe's great work that he did for years. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. Go Grizzlies. And I wish any and everyone listening to this show nothing but the best moving forward. And trust me, I'll make sure that, you'll hear my voice again plenty in the future. But until that time comes, thank you so much. But Damichael and Joe, for those who may be new listeners to the show, Joe was the one who took a chance on me a few years ago. He played a big part in giving me my first opportunity to really cover the Grizzlies. And Damichael, I could not have asked for a better host over the past few months. So thank you to each of you very much. And I wish y'all nothing but the best. I'm excited to see what happens. So definitely thrilled to see where the show's going. And thank y'all very much.
Yeah, we're going to try to this won't be the end of hearing Shawn Coleman's voice, Locked On Grizzlies viewers. We know Steven Adams loves his voice, so we're going to try to get him on here a couple more times over the course of the season and have some fun. And Shawn has been great for Locked On Grizzlies over the course of the past couple of years. He's someone that even before I joined Locked On Grizzlies, I'd listen to from time to time to see, what's going on back home in Memphis when I was 1,000 miles away in Philadelphia. So looking forward to the future with Joe as well. But Shawn was great for me joining, this opportunity.
And Joe, hey, you're the new one here, man. Why don't you send us off?
Sure. That's a lot of pressure. I'm very excited to be joining Locked On. As I mentioned earlier in the show, it's been several years in the making. For those of you that don't know me, which is probably a lot of you, I was the site manager and a part of GrizzlyBearBlues.com for almost a decade before I left this past May, I believe it was, and retired for 2 months, as I mentioned, and now I'm back in it. I've been covering this team for a long time. I've met a lot of good folks. Very fortunate to be able to be back in a position to follow this team and cover this team. Damichael and I are going to, take some time to build that chemistry, that repertoire, or the rapport that Shawn had with Michael. But we'll get there as time goes on, get to know each other a little bit better. And that's one of the cool things about the Locked On process is you're there almost every day, especially once the season starts, you're there every day together. So I look forward to getting to know Damichael more. And Shawn, I've said to you privately, publicly, you're one of my very favorite people that I've ever worked with doing this stuff. I'm thrilled that you're taking on more responsibility at GBB. Parker has been groomed to take over that site for a couple of years now, and he needs good people around him. I've sat in that seat. I know what it's like. So to have you and Brandon, all the other good folks over at GBB, I read it still every day. Love that blog. It's a little part of me. Always will be. This is not anything about competition. This is nothing any like that. We're all going to be ships rising on the same ocean. And I'm very excited to be a part of it once again. So thank you to everyone for the opportunity. Thanks to you guys for listening and watching. I have to get used to the YouTube thing. I have a face for podcasting. So this is going to be an adjustment. But I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a wonderful chance to continue to do something that keeps me close to Memphis, Tennessee, my second home. And I still feel that way all these years later.
And that'll do it. You can find myself at Stats SAC, Joe at Joe Molinax, right there. Damichael at Damichael C. I'm never going to get it. You can also find us right here on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button below, free on all podcast platforms. And hey, until next time, wherever you are and wherever you're listening, thanks again so much for the support. See you again soon. This is the Locked On Grizzlies podcast.